I never actually. Because she just, she knew she worked for me, she's never.
We're all touching again. Touching.
She offered to do the part. You can complete it.
Yeah, I've never come in.
What's that?
I'm done with COVID. People can hear us at this point, right? People can hear us at this point, right?
I guess.
I'm the one that you missed. Yeah.
Oh.
Like to the door.
Really? So we should record that.
What?
We should learn to record that.
I think it will be kind of
Just for the contractors.
Yeah. I would notice it, but it's crazy.
That's what I can.
All I'm saying is that lady is the lefty Cheryl Dave something. In the kitchen house came to us like a long time ago to kind of reconstruct masonry walls. Beautiful big white house.
Listen to each other. West side of the house. They call it It's a launcher on the front. Ready? Laura, y'all ready? Fillmore? Ready? All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the February 9th, 2023 BAR small meeting. My name is Glenn Gardner. I'm sitting as a chair this evening. The other board members present are Julia Martin, Bill Huey, Fillmore Wilson, and Laura Altman. City staff present are Frankie Pinto and Isabella Gordon. The applicants have been required to submit any documents in advance of the meeting, and staff will control the slide presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicants by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance the slide during presentation to go forward or backward. And applicant staff and board members are all required to give their name when they come to the podium before speaking. The order of the meeting will be as follows. First, there is an introduction overview by city staff to introduce the project. Secondly, the applicant may approach the podium, introduce themselves, and present their project for up to 10 minutes. Please state your name, as I mentioned, and anyone affected or affiliated, affiliated with the project, being the owner, developer, designer, consultant, etc., should speak during that portion of the applicant's presentation. Following the applicant's presentation, we will call for written public comment, which to my knowledge, we do not have any written public comment on file tonight. So we will not be reading anything into the record. So the next step is that the public is invited to comment, that is any member of the public, neighbors, preservation groups, and so forth, for up to 10 minutes. And it's my job to call time when we're approaching time on that. Following public comment, city staff will give their comments and recommendation on the project. The applicant then has a moment or two to clarify or correct anything that may have been mistaken. And then finally, we enter board discussion and vote, at which time the public dialogue window is closed. And the only opportunity for the applicant to speak during that time is if they are called upon to answer a question from the board. And finally, the results of the votes will be posted online at charleston-sc.gov/R. And if you are here tonight for 29 Legree Street, please note that that item has been deferred and may be heard at a future date. If there are any students present who need something signed, please see Isabella over to my right. And finally, please make sure your phones are off or on silent and limit your comments to architecture only. Unfortunately, we cannot solve parking, flooding, and other problems of the world. And with that, Frankie, if you will.
First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from January 26th, 2023 meeting.
Motion for approval?
Is there a second or any discussion? Second. Julia has made a motion for approval. Bill, second. All in favor?
Aye.
So Laura's abstained, 4-0.
I wasn't here at the meeting.
So 3 in favor, 2 abstaining. The motion passes. We'll move on to 37 New Street, Frankie.
37 New Street.
I'm sorry. Mr. Huey is recused from this item and I have a form.
37 New Street is requesting after the fact approval for removal of historic front facade and reconstruction with CMU. This is a category 2 in Charlestown, circa 1865 in the Old and Historic District. This is the house location on New Street. Some existing site photos. Context of New and Broad Street. And some Sanborn maps showing the history of the structure. We'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Julie O'Connor. I'm here to do the presentation. After the city shut the project down, Buzz reached out to me and asked me to help navigate the VAR process and do the presentation for him so he didn't have to speak in public. So that is why I'm here. So Frankie, if while I'm talking you just want to go through the photos, there's no need to worry about that. So the project started with a renovation of the building and a repointing of the brick where the mortar was failing. And as Mr. Morris was doing this work, he realized that there was a significant bow on the front elevation of the house. And he called Russell Rosen and Ed Fair in to have a look. And they determined that the brick had delaminated and was in significant risk of falling. And Buzz got a permit to close down the sidewalk and put up scaffolding, but did not get a VAR permit to take this wall down, and that's why we're here. So the wall was removed, a masonry wall was built back in its place. Every brick was taken down, and probably about 95% of the brick was able to be saved, and it is stacked on site and being reused as they are rebuilding the exterior of the brick wall. And those of you that were there today at the site visit this morning, thank you very much for coming. I know that it was great for you to be able to walk up and see everything. And as you noted, about 2/3 of the wall or the brick has been redone. They chose a mortar profile and color that they felt was the closest to the original. And I know that there was some concern on site with the application of the mortar and perhaps the craftsmanship and the workmanship. And so in the meantime, April Wood had given Buzz the name of Up South, and he went to see the great work that they did on the fire station and has decided to contract with them to redo the brickwork and to increase the quality of the work there. So as I said, Buzz Morris is here, as well as Ed Fair, who is the structural engineer, and they would be able to answer any questions, and I will answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant from the board?
Block wall, how far does it extend? You saw how far up it extends, but
There's a white.
does it extend to the water
Buzz
table?
Morris. No, it extends down to the stucco fan bottom.
Yeah, the water table. Okay. And what's the connection between the block? Because I was assuming that water table is 3 wide thick original brick foundation. And what's the connection to the block, to the brick?
I submitted a plan from Russell and Ed section. Is that in there?
So wall section?
Wall section. Plus the email from Russell. The email doesn't matter, but
But it's structurally tied into that
yeah,
base.
it's done per Russell and Ed's requirements.
One that has the application itself.
Ultimately, there's a bond beam at the bottom that's been attached to the district, right? And we are through block, all filled with bond beam every third, fourth. Every 48 inches.
It is, if you open the application PDF, like Laura's saying, and you scroll down, the sections in there.
Yeah, it's page 3 of that document. Thank you. Any other board questions? Or Fillmore, are you following up on that?
I had one more, and at the corner where the block, or 2 more actually, at the corner where the block ties into the existing building, because from my observation this morning, the block goes to the corner where and it looked like there may have been 1 or 2 courses at the corner that
A brick.
yes, a brick. And what's the connection there?
We didn't specify anything connect the block to the brick there.
Brick on either corner, no more in such bad shape that had we epoxied any rebar to it, it wouldn't have held anyway.
That's good.
Whole building.
And I was just curious as to the sort of thinking process to why use build and reinforced block instead of rebuilding it in kind.
We got a lot better wall using reinforced CMU.
It's certainly stronger.
You know, does a lot better job with meeting the wind loads. God forbid any earthquake. Yes, we determined that these modern materials back then, so reuse them.
Thank you.
There's some concern about that kind of thing.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We have no written comments submitted, so we welcome any members of the public to give comment.
I'm Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We appreciated hearing from the applicant on site this morning. While more information is needed to understand how we arrived here, as we were just mentioning or hearing during the presentation, there were some engineering drawings apparently that the public has not had the benefit of reviewing. We are deeply disappointed by the level of demolition that has occurred without the opportunity for the board's review and approval, and we're concerned with the approach taken to rebuild the most important elevation utilizing non-traditional construction techniques. Additionally, the quality of the brickwork that we observed on site today, and particularly the mortar joints on the portion of the reconstructed wall, appear ill-executed and inconsistent with the historic brick detail. Recent research indicates that this Category 2 house was actually built in the 1850s and is one of the only houses in this immediate area to have survived the fire of 1861. It's also thought that bricks from the previous structure that dated to the 1790s were reused in the reconstruction or the construction of 37 New Street, lending further to its significance. We, as the Preservation Society, consistently advocate for historic buildings to maintain their integrity in form, material, and construction. So we ask the board to defer this application for justification of the approach taken, including an engineer's report and study of options to authentically reconstruct this wall. This should include mortar analysis and detailed plans for accurate masonry restoration to be executed by craftsmen who specialize in historic construction techniques, which sounds like a good plan, which is an encouraging start. Thank you.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for after-the-fact approval for the removal of the historic front facade and reconstruction with CMU, and we appreciate the time at the site visit this morning. We are not objecting to the structural repairs that have been completed. It appears that these were necessary from a safety perspective. We do have concern about the quality of the repointing craftsmanship on the front facade. While we agree that the beak joint is the appropriate joint profile for the building, the mortar joints are poorly executed. Mortar covers the faces of the bricks in many locations. The horizontal joint lines are not consistently straight, and the mortar profile is shallow and not well detailed. These factors result in very wide-looking joints. The cumulative impact of these wider-looking joints will dramatically change the appearance of the house as a whole. We respectfully recommend approval of the structural repairs and denial of the existing repointing work. We are certain that better quality craftsmanship can be achieved, and we are pleased to learn that a new masonry contractor has been hired to address these issues.
Public comment? Frankie, if you'll provide the city staff comments, please.
Okay. So I've got a little bit of a timeline that was provided by our enforcement officer, Travis, who unfortunately had to disappear, so couldn't be here for this meeting. We have email documentation from Mr. Rosen to the applicant regarding the state of the building and the need for stabilization. The applicant applied on 8/23 last year for a permit to repoint, and one of the BAR conditions of the permit was a test sample for mortar prior to full scope commencing due to the category 2 rating of the building. We were then notified of a stop work order by the building department and, in January on the 20th, and received a voicemail from Mr. Morris regarding the test panel. Conversation that Travis had with Mr. Morris did not indicate the extent of the alterations to the building and focused on the test patch issue. And there was some confusion about the repointing. On the 23rd, Travis conducted a site visit. I believe Isabel was there as well. One visit. And a visual inspection of the facade, which is when he learned about the CMU block replacing the historic wall. And he discussed with Mr. Morris and confirmed that the historic brick wall had been demolished and replaced with CMU. So that's sort of the timeline as staff knows it right now. Staff comments, we're recommending that drawings are provided of the previously existing front elevation, including details of window opening and trim elements. We have an email from Mr. Rosen stating that repairs and stabilization is needed, but a structural report that documents that and the new proposal for the new wall. And we would like to confirm retainment of the existing windows. So staff really would like the board to weigh in on any additional information that might be required. But we are recommending deferral for additional information and documentation.
Thank you. Does the applicant have anything to clarify about what has been presented?
Yes, we'd just like to talk for another minute about the quality of the work, which we definitely recognize and agree with the conservation groups. As I mentioned, Buzz is engaging up south to remove what has been done and reinstall and redo the mortar. They will make a historic mix that will better match the original mortar. And we would obviously be very open for a test sample to be approved by staff once that's been done. As I indicated, all of the brick, 95% of the brick has been saved. And so I think we could also work to better match and pull out the pieces that probably were the exterior pieces originally, which would also help with the mortar joints that are a little bit different. So that's the commitment of Buzz and the
Thank you. So the floor is now closed for board discussion.
I generally agree with staff's position. I'm not going to pretend that I have a better idea than the structural engineer on how to approach this. But I would like to see, I think that more detailed drawings, particularly maybe the drawings that we have here. A bond beam on top of the existing brick at the bottom. They don't show any real connection of that. The new wall is shown in detail. And I mean, it's a block wall that looks great. It's structurally very sound. Instinctively, I'm a little concerned about very rigid, very strong build concrete block wall tied into, particularly at the corners of an old 3-wide thick historic structure, because that block wall will behave much differently than the brick. So I think a little more detail on how that is going to work would be helpful. I think that mortar analysis would be in order. I agree that the brickwork so far is really unacceptable. The veneer brickwork is unacceptable. The vertical joints seem much wider than the original work. The horizontal joints, if they're not wider, they are not straight. One of the beauties of that type of joint, that little peak joint, some people call it, is that it's tucked away from the face of the brick. And even though the brick is irregular, because handmade brick are always irregular, that joint is run as absolutely as straight as possible, so your eye goes to that line and not the brick. So I think it can be executed much better, colored. I think we need test panels, and I think we need a clean sample. I think having a clean sample is really important because there's a lot of new mortar on the face and edges of that brick, which makes it look worse than it probably actually is. And, so I would be in favor of deferral for additional information.
Additional information being the mortar analysis.
Or at least enough sampling that you're sure that you're getting back to an old color or closer to an original color.
And structural report, a proper structural report. I mean, this detail is not even stamped, you know, it's just kind of
Stamped.
formal, yeah. Drawings, what in particular?
Got a staff that said drawings of them
I think that photos
or photos.
from before the scaffolding was put up would be very helpful, because, and you're gonna need that to go back and make drawings. But I think the photos, some detail, hopefully there were some detailed photos of the windows and the, you know, the details that staff mentioned that would be helpful, maybe more helpful to have in photographic form than drawing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just say it's unfortunate that we're at this point and having to look backward and kind of imagine that none of this was done. And someone asked me this morning if I could recall a time when we, the board, approved sort of wholesale reconstruction of a masonry wall with this radical of an intervention, and the only one I could remember was the kitchen house at 54 Hazel. But then I think I remember it was Curry Engineering, and you know we all went prior before any work was done, and I think they made a good case that that wall was just, you know, in danger of totally failing. And I think they ended up with a veneer on a new wall, a new structural wall, framed. I think I'm not
I
sure.
think it was a frank wall.
So I mean, point being that in general, I'm not opposed to that sort of intervention on a house of this type. But it's really difficult and disturbing to think about it after it's already been done. It's really tough. I think I would be in line with you, Fillmore, and staff and the preservation groups on this.
I would be curious about the structural aspect of, yes, this might be the better way to do it to meet current codes, but could it have also been done well, going back with the 3 lot? I'm saying we shouldn't go back and do that. I'm just, that's what's hard about not being able to have this discussion before it's taken.
Tells me that up south or someone of their caliber would have been able to rebuild this wall.
I mean, I mean, that's a stronger wall, but it's not.
Not a
It's only one
historically
piece of
accurate
it. It's
wall,
only one
yeah.
piece of the building.
So I'm with Fillmore that we would need to understand the detailing of the transitions and make sure that we're not creating a worse condition in the long run.
Okay.
My only comment amongst the board is I think in the past Fillmore, we have sometimes described what a sample panel would be. And in your comments about the importance of the joint and the strike on that brick, I would probably look to you maybe to suggest how large should that panel be? If it's 3 bricks wide, you probably can't tell what you're asking.
I think it needs to be at least 3 or 4 feet wide. The height, you know, maybe 6 or 7 courses. That will give you a really good idea. And I mean, somebody like you could produce that, you know, up south, could easily. And they can do it on, I mean, they can do it right on the building. I mean, they don't have to make it separate. They can do it right on the building. They just need to do some. And I think the color needs to be, the color sample needs to be close. And I think they could probably do a smaller color sample and get it approved from staff. And then do a larger sample for quality execution.
In terms of the CMU wall, it's possible that we're all okay with that, but it would be nice to have justification as if it were prior to this work of why it's that way. Okay. Let's fashion a motion here. Of deferral. And I guess it's would normally just deny. I don't know. It's been done. I don't know.
Staff would recommend deferral, I think.
Staff was recommending deferral because we're trying to work with the family. We know they have concerns, and they have reached out to us for whatever we need, whatever needs to be done. That was one of the reasons we worded it that way. They are trying to do the right thing by the house.
I mean, we could say deferral of the block and denial of the existing veneer. And that, because I think we're all sort of on board that block's not coming back out of that building.
Sounds good.
Well, I mean, you've got all the comments.
Okay, okay.
So go ahead.
Let's start with deferral of the CMU and denial of the brick veneer as currently constructed, and requirement of an engineering report including exploration of reconstruction, traditional reconstruction, hiring mortar sampling by a qualified expert, hiring before photographs of the area of work, and requiring staff approval of the proposed mortar and mortar joint prior to a sample panel. 6 or 7 courses. Oh. Why? Is that it?
Julia's made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Fillmore. Frankie, you have all the details of that motion?
Bring it back. Or
I have the bullet points.
yeah, that's all I need.
Okay. So the motion is for deferral of CMU block,
Yes.
denial of the existing brick veneer as currently installed, requirement for an engineer report, including exploration of reconstruction to match original construction, historic mortar sampling, before photos, staff approval of mortar prior to a sample panel, 6 to 7 courses tall, 3 to 4 feet wide, being built on site. We have a second from Fillmore. I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Chair votes with the majority, 4-0 with 1 recused. Agenda item is 133 Hester Street. And Bill Huey is back in the meeting.
One 133 Hester is requesting demolition of front porch and chimney and reconfiguration of fenestration. It is category 4 in Wagner Terrace, circa 1938, and historic materials demolition permit. Is the structure's location on Hester Street. Most recent site photo we could find on Google, it does not have the vegetation on it at the moment. Context of Hester. Some Sanborn maps showing the history of the structure. Turn it over to the applicant.
Sure. Thank you. Chris Potter with the Studio Architecture. 153 Hester, obviously I've got a site visit, taking a look. The pictures, it is a relatively simple house. Over the years, it has lost a lot of the character elements that it may once had. Let me go forward to kind of the elevation sheet. This is going right here. I'll go back to the last one. There you go. So a lot of the items that we originally would have been from the house kind of been lost. We're looking at a kind of a black aluminum painted structure for the porch, which clearly wasn't original. It is currently wrapped in vinyl siding with what looks to be asbestos siding underneath that. All the original windows have been removed and replaced with lower quality vinyl windows, as well as layers of security grates too. The hope is really to kind of bring back this house kind of more in keeping with the neighborhood in terms of form and just having some of them there as well. And so the hope in doing so is to kind of remove this front porch. We'll be putting back a front porch in a character that is maybe more in line with some of the bungalows that are around the neighborhood. The property we have zoning approval to add an addition to the rear, but the home will stay, a one-story home. It will maintain 3 bedrooms as it currently has 3 bedrooms. We'll have 2 bathrooms, I think a little better than the existing bathroom. But overall, the form and its contribution to the neighborhood will remain the same. We're just hoping to renovate the home in a manner that gives it some of that character that maybe it never had. We can see, obviously, from the front of the property, it's a bit of a kind of a hodgepodge. It's not particularly symmetrical with its own windows and door locations currently, as well as a number of kind of unsympathetic changes over the years that have left it in a relatively sad state of disrepair. All I really had, just to reiterate that none of the historic windows are existing; they're all low quality vinyl. The house itself, obviously wrapped in vinyl siding, as well as asbestos siding too below that. Chimney itself is not connected to any kind of fireplace. It is essentially just one of the old kind of coal stove exhaust. So it's relatively small in nature. It doesn't connect any kind of interior element that could be celebrated. Even the windows itself, as they currently align, aren't particularly reminiscent of cottages or craftsman bungalows that we see kind of in this part of town. So it is kind of an outlier in the very simplistic form. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant at this time?
Work been done at the interior to be able to tell if these existing openings are the original openings? Have you done any interior demo?
Have not yet.
Okay.
It's just kind of been sitting. There's probably, I wouldn't think the openings that are currently aren't original necessarily. But it's really hard to tell. Inside is wrapped in mostly like wood paneling. Not like wood, like beadboard, but like, some wood paneling. And the exterior obviously has multiple layers of stuff to kind of understand where things look like.
Thank you. We have no written public comment, so is there any public comment?
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for demolition of the front porch and chimney and the reconfiguration of the windows at 133 Hester Street. Although the house siding has been covered with vinyl, it appears that much of the original fabric is intact. Based on our site evaluation, we believe that the porch form, including the roof structure and ironwork, is original. The existing window sashes do not appear to be historic, but we believe the openings are historic. The chimney is historic. Furthermore, we observed similar houses with the same architectural features across the street and adjacent to this house. These historic elements at 133 Hester Street are character-defining features. The loss of these features would result in a house that no longer fits into its neighborhood context, which is remarkably intact. We recommend denial of this application.
Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We have identical comments to that of HCF, so we would ask that you deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. City staff comments.
So I apologize, I forgot to correct this staff observation. Staff did observe that the previous siding had been changed vinyl. It's not changed vinyl. The vinyl has covered the original asbestos siding. That's this morning. Staff comment is that the front porch with its gable roof and the chimney are the few character defining features that are remaining and that they should be retained. Our recommendation is for denial of demolition. And chimney.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to any of the comments?
Sure, we have to. The form of this particular part of the neighborhood has a lot of, each of the individual homes in this part of the neighborhood have a lot of different forms. And I think it's maybe isn't just to say that this particular porch is so in kind to matching with majority of homes in this area. While there may be one or two other homes that have a similar porch configuration, most of them actually have more generous porches. And you see a lot of bungalow style homes in this part of town, that leads to that kind of neighborly feeling and neighborly atmosphere. A lot of the kind of the rhythm of the street produces. If anything, this home is somewhat an outlier to that construction and to that form. And the hope is for us to reconfigure the porch in a manner that brings it back to what most of the homes in the neighborhood actually present to the street and to the neighborhood. I would be hard pressed to say that a black aluminum holding up that porch is original. It's not iron. It certainly looks been redone previously. I have a feeling that other parts of it maybe changed over the years as well, so I'm not quite sure that what we see is the true form it was in 1938 when it was constructed. It is missing a lot of some of the characters I think that makes this particular area of town and the neighborhood more interesting and more enjoyable. We hope to be able to reconfigure some of these items to kind of anything match some of the other homes in the surrounding a little better than how it currently sits today.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now enter board discussion.
And I would just say that I think the house is pretty cool. It's not really a giant fan, but I think it's pretty cool. And if I were wagering, I would think that the existing, fenestration locations are original. The porch ceiling and the porch beams and pretty much all the structure that you can make out appears to be original to me. Personally, I'd be open to losing the iron supports and replacing them with something different. But yeah, I do feel like the size of the porch and the design of it are original, and they're almost mirrored by some of the neighboring houses. And I totally understand wanting to bring this property, into the 21st century and add some space on it, and it looks promising that you've gotten maybe a zoning variance to do that in the rear. And I think you could achieve all the program that it looks like you want, including keeping the chimney flue, just that brick element inside would be interesting, I think. But yeah, to lose it outside would be a shame when it does have only a few historic, character defining elements. I think it's really cute.
I agree. And I think the chimney is a defining feature. If you look up and down the street, there are a number of similar houses with similar chimneys in similar locations. I think the porch is a defining feature. To comment on whether the steel railings and columns are original. However, metal railings and columns from this period are common in that neighborhood. In fact, 130, 135, 138, 143, and 144 Hester Street, all on that block, all have similar porches with iron columns and railings. And so it's right in that little piece of the neighborhood, it predominates, that form predominates. So I think it's a character defining feature. I think it would be a shame. So, and the chimney, the vinyl siding, I'm fine with that going.
Yeah, I agree, Phil, more, and especially going there and seeing actually one of the homes right across the street has the identical ironwork on that board, and another has similar. So I didn't take an inventory. I appreciate your inventory. But I do believe that porch is character defining. Chimney, I'm not 100% sure. I agree with some degree of retaining it. I just have thought in the past that true fireplace chimneys definitely have priority versus potentially vents chimneys. This is probably an old, I would think maybe an old oil furnace or something like that was probably in the house. But I would agree. Consensus would be at that point. And I guess we didn't really, and frankly, I didn't see anything in particular about the windows as far as
We weren't
relocation.
sure if those were the original windows or not. We knew the windows themselves were not original. We weren't
Right.
sure if those were the original openings or not.
Would there be a position if there was some altering of window locations or?
We're not quite sure what our purview would be over relocating that,
Right.
the same opening on the wall.
Okay, because we're in agreement that the windows are not historic and they could be.
And our view was, we don't object to sort of relocating that opening on the wall. We're not sure about our enforceability of that.
Okay. That's all I'm doing.
I would add that the porch has seen some change over time, because we could tell that those top 3 or 4 courses were different from the others. change, but the form is still there, and the form and it's character defining, as y'all mentioned, and so I would not want to see it taken away. Personally, I think that the windows should maybe stay where they are. I understand you can replace them. It's a lot of demolition if you look on the elevations. The windows out and creating improvements.
Yes, Frankie, to your point, what we're talking about is the purview of demolition would be, can these windows be removed? Considering they're not historic, I would say they could be removed. What goes back and where it goes is not.
Correct, but we would be able to say that the opening has to remain the same size.
Openings for.
And location, I think you could say
Yes,
that.
we could say the opening size and location can remain.
I would just say with regard to the porch, I think the porch roof is completely original. If you look at the trim on it, I think the metal post and obviously the concrete floor probably all been tweaked. I mean, we've had this discussion recently of, it seems that somebody went through this neighborhood sort of a door to door, replacing rotting wood porch floors and posts with concrete and aluminum and iron, probably in the 50s. But those elements have become commonplace on many of these houses. But I think you can also look around and make a case for there to be a wood floor and wood posts that are appropriate for the style of this house and probably do what the applicant's wanting to do, give it perhaps a little more character. I think that's all doable within the form of what's there, with keeping the roof, the entire roof structure. I mean, the ceiling of its original beaded board. I think all of that probably is what it was and likely hasn't been touched other than having the vinyl put on the front of it.
That's a good question about siding. Clearly they want to take off the vinyl. Is everyone comfortable with allowing them to replace the asbestos with one of the materials that are sort of pre-approved if they wanted to?
Well, I guess that's not before us at the moment. So it kind of asks, at the moment, he would probably need to come back to us with an application.
Or deal with staff.
Because he's not asking for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or deal with staff based on the new policy. Yeah. Okay, all right. I'll take it. All right, finally, the windows. In my mind, it's I think the front elevation is composed really modestly and sweetly, and that I'm confident that's the original configuration on the front. I would not have a problem with there being reconfiguration, shifting of things on the side, knowing that all the windows are going to be changed anyway, but is that something that you guys, or?
The fourth one, there's definitely a rhythm and those side windows looks original and intentional.
So no.
You would be able to work within the, restrictions of the existing window opening, so it's not like there's a whole lot of them that could create difficulties creating some other spaces. We're not supposed to think about it good or bad, but for the historic house, we should keep those openings on the porch.
Okay.
And keep the porch roof structure like Glenn said.
Is this chimney request any different from the one we saw a few weeks ago?
Franklin. The Maverick, somewhere there. Okay. And we wouldn't know if there's a fireplace in there, right? We just know that there's a chimney.
There probably wasn't. The chimney flew for a very likely little oil space heater, big oil space heater.
It has a terracotta, a square or rectangular terracotta liner in it.
So, and there are a number of those houses that have chimneys like that because I'm sure they have the same kind of heating system. Or lack thereof, actually.
Yeah, and to Glenn's point,
Not
it
sure I
really
call
is
it a system.
just like the one on Franklin or Maverick that we just saw.
In that case, we can't tell them they have to keep it inside.
No, never.
Well, all they have to do is keep it above the roof
The roof.
level.
The above roof.
They don't have to keep it inside.
For what it's worth, I think it would be cool to keep it inside, but that's irrelevant. All right, so I'll try to form a motion for, it would be for denial of the demolition of the front porch roof structure and denial of the request to shift original window openings. And denial of the request to remove the chimney. That applicant could work with staff regarding replacement of metal columns. And the porch floor.
So if you wanted to streamline, you could probably just add a comment about working with staff on the siding
That's-
to keep them perhaps from having to come back.
Yeah, sure. Or siding or other elements.
Yes.
So we have a motion on the floor by Julia. Is there a second? Second by Laura. All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is 4 in favor. Chair votes with the majority. 5 in favor of the motion. Next up is 18 Green Hill Street. 29 Legree is deferred if anybody did not hear that announcement at the beginning.
'18 Green Hill Street is requesting conceptual approval of a 2-story rear addition and 1-story covered porch. It is not surveyed in Charlestown circa 1920 in the old and historic districts. Location on Green Hill Street. Existing site photos. Sanborn map showing the history of the structure. Turn it over to the applicants.
I'm Marty, and I'm here presenting this project for Neil Stevenson, who is not able to be here today. This project was last presented to this board in September, and there were several just pretty specific comments about the original design. So I think that we can kind of quickly run through this, if you would just sort of flip through, I'll just begin. You'll go to the actually, if you'll go to the front elevation. So this is the original existing elevation, and in the last proposed version,
Yes, existing front and the existing rear.
right, there was a proposal to move the front door to the center. I'm sorry, yes, there was a proposal to move the front door, and in the proposed, so if you want to flip through, they're a little bit in awkward order.
I think there's a prior proposal for the front and the current, let me see if I can find it.
Here we go. Actually, I think that was it.
Trying to go back. There we go.
Yeah, so in the previously proposed, they were proposing to move the door, the front entry door to the center. And there was a comment that you all would like to see it in its original location, so the new proposed has it in its original location. And then if you want to just flip to the next page, that's pretty accurate for, so, and then the sort of second and third comments were about differentiating the addition from the original house. And so to do that, the gable roof of the addition was dropped down, and the siding was changed from the 11-inch cement siding to a 6-inch cementitious siding. And then if you go one more page. More than that. Or actually, you might have the rear on the same sheet. That's the yeah, okay, there we go. All right. Then the last comment was about the form of the porch. So the in this proposed addition, the porch now has detail that mimics more closely the detail of the front porch and a bit of a hipped roof, and the way that the trim lines work and columns. That is my understanding.
You, do any of the board members have a question for Rob? We have any public comment?
I'm Catherine Carroll of the Preservation Society of Charleston. Upon review of the updated drawings, we appreciate the lower roof height of the addition and the front door remaining in its original location. Our only comment is that ideally we would like to see the width of the addition narrowed, at least on the south elevation, and there should be a greater return before the addition begins. As proposed, the offset between the plane of the historic building and the addition appears minimal, but otherwise we're comfortable with the proposal and thank the applicant for reaching out.
Staff comments?
I've just had observation that previous board and staff comments have been addressed. And there is, on the new version, there's some exposed CMU that comments should be painted or stucco. Our recommendation is for conceptual approval with staff comments and final review by SAM.
Thank you. Do you have any corrections or
No,
feedback?
that, and I would imagine that painting or stuccoing the CMU would be suitable.
Board discussion?
One question. Robbie, do you know if that is existing other than the front porch?
No, I don't know anything like
It looked like, we tried to check this out a little in photos, it looks like there is a seam wall down there, but we think it's painted right now. But there was one drawing where it was noted as exposed. It's on the previous one, and but on one of it, and I think it's might be a drawing error, on one of the sheets, it says, on the proposed drawing, it has it as exposed, or, it's exposed.
The public or the street facing facade has creeping fig vine all over it, so I frankly don't know what's under there.
We had to go back through Google Earth to find it.
We're in more discussion. Say anything you'd like to say.
Thank you.
Please.
I think it looks better. I appreciate the changes responding to our previous comments. My one request, and it's along the lines of what the Preservation Society brought up, I don't necessarily have a problem with the reveal being only like a corner board wide, 6 inches, whatever. But if that eave could be changed, because it almost looks, at least in 2 dimensions, it looks like the eave overhang on the addition is even wider than the one on the main house, so that in that proposed front elevation, you actually see the little eaves popping out back in the back. So I would think that could be pulled in and the effect would be mitigated. And then just a technicality, that's cementitious siding. As staff, you would pick up on that being one of the profiles that we.
There is existing cementitious siding on the house.
I also noticed where it mentioned shiplap, cementitious shiplap, maybe in the response. But then on the drawings, it looked like it was, hardy box siding, standard. So I was confused about that also.
But on the addition, I would think if it's new, then we would want them to use the siding that we that we generally expect.
And that would be part of the standard staff conditions for final approval.
Thicker profile.
Like oil or true exterior.
Yeah.
That is part of the boilerplate staff conditions for final approval.
Same comment about the house.
I did too. I think having that eve extend past the corner board of the original houses, it just really looks strange.
My 2 comments would be that just to tidy up the comment about the concrete block, I think there should be a blanket statement that any exposed concrete block should be stuccoed, not painted. And then I know it's not, or I don't think it's part of the application, but it seems like a very good opportunity in doing work to the house to try to rectify the really bad spark arrestor situation on this chimney, and just put some type of a proper chimney cap on it. And I know, we can't require that, but with the level of work they're proposing to do, it really would help the house.
Motion for conceptual approval with staff comment and board comment to limit addition eave overhang that doesn't protrude. main building corner. The comment encouraging improvement of chimney cap situation. I mean, the staff comment.
Sorry.
The staff comment says it should be enforced.
Oh, that should, okay, so. Let's. I don't know if it's easier to adjust staff's comment or erase it, but it should be stuccoed, not painted or stuccoed.
Becky, do you have those points?
Yes, I do.
So Julia has made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Fillmore. All of those in favor? Your votes with the majority, so the motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
We should just pick one.
Thank you.
Which is requesting preliminary approval for renovation to existing structure and rear addition, and renovation and rear addition to accessory structure at street. It is category 4 in North Central, circa 1920 in historic corridor district. This is the structure's location on Rutledge. Some existing site photos. Text of Rutledge. And Sanborn map showing the history of the structure. Turn it over to the applicants.
Thank you. Chris Bonner with the City Architecture. This is in Rutledge. I think looking, we showed before about the Sanborn maps. Even now existing, there are multiple little kind of structures on the property. And in that vein, as we move forward with the renovation of some of these existing properties, our hope is to really kind of highlight the existing historic structure while showing a separation that hopefully as apparent as physically possible, while still kind of creating something that seems like together they all belong somewhere to the site. This is the street elevation. Obviously, 610 Rutledge is a little yellow house on the top band of homes, and the kind of auxiliary structure is the one on the right. That's kind of bright red color. That'd be a little kind of commercial space. Show the next slide. As you can see, the existing a lot of existing structures on the site are certainly in very rough shape. But the cottage itself is actually in surprisingly good shape. And really, the intent of our application and the renovation in process in general is really geared towards preservation of that existing structure kind of in its own form and element. And so as we talk about what we're adding to the site, the hope is to really separate what we're adding both in form and views with what is existing as a cute little cottage. Go to the next slide. Inevitably, as I've talked to before, this particular kind of vernacular of structure, adding on to little cottages, is pretty constant. It happens a lot in this neighborhood. A couple slides here, various additions, two-story additions to structures of varying success. And our hope really in moving forward in this design was to make sure that we do not create something on the back that looks like or some other kind of addition kind of tucked in the back, but really to try to separate our addition to the existing structure in a manner that it truly reads as two separate buildings, so that the average passerby and those that pass by the site would read the two structures as really separate buildings, to highlight the fact that we have maintained as much as possible kind of the historic core of that cottage, and our addition is something separate, something more of its time on the property. The next slide. As you can tell, some of these additions tend to get pretty wacky. Next slide. I wanted to add some images of kind of what the character of new construction in the neighborhood is. Obviously, we see surprisingly white palette, but the detail of most of these structures is relatively plain, simple, in various degrees. The one on the far right-hand corner that has one-sided shutters obviously is just across the street, maybe a block down. So there are various interpretations of what the neighborhood is currently building in this time. Next slide. The existing structures. Next slide. And really, as we add on to it, we're trying to make a clear delineation of the historic core, which is at the left side of the plan towards the front of the property, and our addition to the right. Obviously, it is not a particularly huge lot, and with the small cottage pulled back from the street, our envelope of construction is kind of towards the rear. And so in doing so, we've kind of moved the mass of our addition to the right, to kind of separate it from kind of linear from the historic core cottage. Next slide. In addition, there are some poorly constructed rear additions that we're going to kind of be a portion taken down to add the addition to. Next slide. And then this is basically what we did last time and what we're presenting today currently. And so between our last meeting and this meeting, we took some of the comments to heart about really streamlining and simplifying the elevation, what is seen from the street. So we had a small balcony that kind of looked into that courtyard space between the two buildings. That's been removed. The fenestrations have been simplified. All the trim has been unified, so it all matches in a particular manner. We've taken away maybe the square window, has been a little narrower, a little taller, to be a portion that is maybe more in keeping with the city's guidelines. We looked at changing the roof as well. There were some comments about the height of the pitch of the roof. It currently matches the historic property. When it was flattened, it ended up, especially in the perspective, looking awfully strange and even not in keeping with kind of the existing home. So we have kept the roof slope in matching with the current home. Even though it's much farther back, the addition will be 65 feet, I believe, from the street. So it'll be considerably farther back view-wise. Go to the next slide, please. On the right-hand side, really trying to be a clear demarcation between the existing property and the new construction, so that preservation of the front structure will be obvious and complete. Next slide. The next slide. I think really kind of looking at the front street elevations, which is the small elevation on the bottom of the sheet. We're really looking at kind of creating a separation between that new mass of the addition by shifting it to the right and keeping kind of the left-hand side historic piece of the property really where it is, obviously, but as separated from the addition as possible. the next slide. Next slide. Some sections. The next slide. I think some of these kind of perspective visuals help really kind of show what's truly visible from the street. The home on the left-hand side is flanked by a two-story kind of mixed-use building. And behind that, on Strawberry, are also multiple two-story buildings as well. So the only view you really have of the structure is from Rutledge Avenue. And that's where we're putting our effort in trying to separate the masses so it looks like multiple buildings on the site. And historically, there were multiple residences there. Go to the next slide. And then finally, not necessarily this is the paint color we would paint it, but just the idea that, I think the idea that we can create separation of these two masses in the form of paints, in color, in keeping, the historic core, maybe darker tone, and the new work in the rear, a lighter but matching tone, so that they once again don't feel like they're completely separate in terms of color, but also that there is clearly a separation. They are different, and then break from what is historic, what is existing, and then what is new farther back on the property. I think that's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of that?
Chris, could you just address, I'm looking at the previous motion, that number 2, about kind of disengaging the Freedman's Cottage from the new addition and clarifying that distinction? Did anything happen on that front?
I think we looked at it from a physical standpoint, and really property line side is not really visible from any right of way. So any kind of indentation or separation doesn't create visually when anybody can see an actual separation from the properties. And being a relatively small, narrow site from really a site and program, it is inevitably it's a narrow, deep house. So the rear as you build onto it, you only have so much width. So any kind of juxtaposition creates some very generally strange situations in waterproofing. So we thought that the hope is to separate these buildings as much as possible. The idea was, I think color can do it surprisingly well. I think the physicality of separating in some manner, no one's going to see it. It's like it's not really present from the right of way, so I don't know if it really has the particular effect that would be noticeable in any particular manner.
All right. May I ask Julia a question? Are you talking about the north or the south?
I guess
side?
more than north, but just, some sort of move that would let future people really know.
Down that entire north side.
Mm-hmm.
Separating the roof line was hopefully to give a very clear delineation of, okay, this is the end of the historic property, this is the new construction. So we're trying to physically separate it in that manner.
Thank you. Not required for preliminary review?
They are required for preliminary review, and that is one of staff's requests and comments. There are sections of the structure, there is not a specific wall section.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. Do we have public comment?
Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We appreciate that this proposal continues to demonstrate improvement However, we just want to be on record one more time saying that we do disagree with this design approach for the ordinance requirement for additions to be subordinate to primary structures and type, scale, and mass. Also, the precedents shown in the submittal of one-story cottages with two-story additions are not sensitive examples and should be considered the exception rather than the rule. And further, at the last review, the board specifically stipulated that the new addition disengaged from the Freedman's cottage, which has not been adequately addressed. So we asked for a meaningful restudy of the height, scale, and mass of the addition, in particular in relationship to the historic one-story structure. Thank you.
Anyone else? City staff?
Observation was that for some of the previous comments, details have been simplified. Staff comments provide material information and details, including wall section. And there is just a drawing issue where there's a label for the balcony that was removed from the previous note. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval with deferral for preliminary. Staff is comfortable finalizing the preliminary approval during final review by staff if the board is comfortable with that, at which point we would verify wall sections,
Would the applicant like to respond or clarify anything?
We hoped to work between the last submission and this submission to go through as much of the comments and discussion that was able to be heard. Certainly there was some conflicting thoughts, so we did our best to kind of get the overall idea of simplification and making the rear structure less personality into it, I guess. The only other thing I would say is the comments from the Historic Restoration Group about the neighbor painting examples being poor examples. They are certainly, though oddly enough, that's kind of how vernacular architecture sometimes evolves in a strange sense. That all these homes have this kind of work done by the individuals that have lived there and in the neighborhood. And certainly, it's an interesting kind of process to see that over the years, not guided by form, kind of what happens. So I wouldn't necessarily say those are the outliers, as that is exactly what the neighborhood has been doing for decades in response to kind of this design and solution. Not that it's good or bad, but that's kind of what they continue to do. So hopefully we can do something better and something different that maybe is a little better for this neighborhood. Thank you.
And board discussion.
Has this got conceptual? I was here for one of the meetings, but it was
It did.
So it was conceptual approval. Laura, you can see there's a list of the comments from that. Yeah.
So that was interesting. So then, just so I understand, from the standpoint of like height, scale, and mass of that rear, that's kind of beyond. Okay, just.
Yeah, I think the main issue for me would be the differentiation of the sort of ongoing addition behind the little Freedman's cottage, and potentially the introduction of at least a hyphen between those two elements. It looks like there's room on the plan to facilitate that. Perhaps in that hyphenated area, however wide that is, might be able to be some form of a roof line that would allow the continuing roof line not to be over or attached above the Freedman's cottage, but separated. That's something I think I would be hoping for in order to really truly differentiate where things stop and start, because right now it appears that they're sort of sharing a common wall. We've already gone through the two-story elements and things like that, and I agree there's a lot of vernacular going on up there. When I hear the word vernacular, I always think of, well, it's kind of like Fielder's Choice, a carpenter or a DIY or whatever. Not that it hasn't happened, it happens all over the place, but I think there's some principles that we're trying to adhere to that an architect should be aware of and be able to work within. So sort of separation, hyphenating is one of those. So that's really, I guess I would say, my main point. I would leave the refinement of detail and everything. I'm fine with staff continuing that dialogue, but it's really, that's the main point for me, is the potential to hyphenate and separate and free up the Freedman's Cottage form.
I agree with you, Bill, in that I think that to me is 2 or 2 and 3 being the motion items from last time are the items that have not been successfully done. There's nothing to keep anybody from just looking over that little wood fence on the north side. It's completely visible from the public right of way.
I agree, and I would add that I would down a little bit, we've got a 9 floor on the second floor, and the way the rafters can intersect, you could get a little bit more down. I don't know that it's gonna make a huge difference though, so. I agree with the comments.
Yeah, the same thing, I think, that separating those two structures and it's very difficult. I admit, I concede that it's very difficult to get that addition behind the Freedman's Cottage really ideally subordinate. And so I think that if you can't do that, a little space in there is as close as you can come to an acceptable compromise. And I think offsetting the larger building the way it's been done, I think is good solution to a difficult design problem. And so I don't really have an issue with that, but I agree with Bill and Glenn. I would like to see some separation in that.
I mean, and Fillmore, I think your point about, I mean, that this is a very difficult design scenario, trying to add meaningful square footage onto what was a small Freedman's Cottage. And I mean, some of those examples that were shown are downright silly and do not look good. And it's probably why, in part, this is being reviewed by the board, because it has kind of gone a little rogue in the past. I think he's done a lot of what we've asked, and it's improved.
We're gonna, you know, these little buildings like this are gonna be put to practical use. I think there has to be some additional space found somewhere, and I think all in all, except for the lack of separation and that initial addition, I think this is a pretty reasonable way to achieve that.
It's very much improved since I saw it originally.
Substantially, yeah.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Really, the only issue that it seems like all of us have is revisiting that comment number 2 from the previous motion, introducing a hyphen to address that, right?
Right, separation.
Mm-hmm. So since it already has conceptual approval, I'm going to make a motion for deferral board comments, staff comments, and a board comment to revisit comment 2 from the previous motion to introduce a hyphen to separate the forms at the back of the Freedman's cottage and final review by staff.
Do we have a second?
But you did deferral, right? So where's the final review coming? Oh, but it all.
Or just defer it to staff,
Even
yeah.
for the
Yeah,
hyphen.
and if there were the wall sections and the things that are required for submittals, we could do preliminary, but there's not, so. Does that make sense?
I'm not here for the use of that.
If, I mean, as long as staff feels they properly address that.
Staff can always send it back if they feel like the board would need to see it, then.
So we have a motion from Julia. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Fillmore. All in favor? Three. So the motion passes 5-0. Number 2, President Place will be up next.
2 President is requesting conceptual approval for alterations to fenestration, steps, and awnings. It is a category 4 in Canterbury, Elliotboro, circa 1895 in the Old City districts. This is location on President Place. Existing site photos. And the context of President Place. And sandboard map showing the history of the structure. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. In the corner of President Place. More maps, because they're sort of all referenced then later. So the house appears on 3 sandboard maps, starting in 1902, and it's shows it's a 2-story structure with what appears to be a 2-story piazza on the west side. 1944, same configuration, obviously, except there is an addition at the back, and the piazza or porch doesn't say if it's 1 or 2 stories. That piazza is still showing up in 1944. And then 1955 really just sort of the same condition. Looking sort of north west in the corner, it's you'll see in the plans and elevations of same side hall. Also on the west side is a little curious. And you'll see the elevation. That's looking back. Present Place is dead end to the crosstown of something back. That's the house. Existing administration. So, you can see there's, I was here a few weeks ago for that new structure, all over the place. And you can see that there is curation of all sorts of things. There's a deck, there's strange awning, there's a picture window you'll see in the elevation up here. And then this blue blank space. And this is the location of where that arrow is showing. There's the existing survey by hall. There's this very strange deck which provides access to the duplex. 2 stories, but it's divided in a single plan in a very strange way, with the front and back 2-story units. So the interior is bigger, as well as what I believe is that west elevation. So this deck, HVAC platform will all be going away. Next slide. And this is proposed site plan, which is showing obviously the removal of all that deck and HVAC stuff, and the addition of 2 side steps, landings, and wood awnings, and then also rear wood. I'll show you the plan and elevation. Next, please. That's just an overlay showing what's going away and what's happened with the new configuration. A lot less. That was all for zoning. Next, please. Okay, so this is existing floor plans, first and second floor. You can see really about the only thing that appears original is this side hall stairway. I don't know if that is, this is not masonry. It's fireplace box. You'll see in the elevation. It's a metal flue coming up. So there was not a central stairway, but whether there was a central fireplace, I don't know. Or were there with a side hall, you traditionally have a double parlor with 2 fireplaces there. So there's no way to know that. You can see the plan has been strangely altered. There's a kitchen under the stairs, there's a winder stair for this back unit. Strange. And what's very strange now is the entrance. This is obviously the entrance space, but this entrance to the back is there's a car park there you can get to it, and then up on this deck, obviously changing that. Next slide, please. I won't go over the plan, but we can reference back to it based on the proposed elevations. But we keep the front and rear units as 2 stories. Sorry, oh, go back. Sorry, yeah, thanks. But I cleaned up, keep the original stairway. Nice and turn back. But the biggest move is to maintain that entrance in the A. And then proposing sort of a nicer way to enter into Unit B is the new and sort of pedestrian gate at the rear. Then these 2 side doors, stairways. You know, this is a corner building. Well, not such a busy street, but corner building to very limited outdoor space. So the idea in this site plan, conceptual, it's going to be nicer. But the idea is at least to give these 2 units a little bit of something outside. So that is the idea of side stairways, and you'll see from the elevation. Second floor plan. So finally getting to what we're proposing. Pleasant Street, east side, no changes to the elevation. I mean, obviously there's been some window things happening. Who knows when? Just remove, there's that metal going away. There's some plastic shutters that are pinned up that we're gonna get rid of. And then, oh, here's main elevation, west elevation. When you picture window, doorway, or it shouldn't be, yeah, awning. And then these windows, which I went on and on about the Sanborn map. So if there was a piazza there, hard to tell from this map what it was. Those sort of appear, I mean, they're somewhat in the rhythm of a block. That makes sense. Opening window, piazza type. So, original, yes, probably. Obviously not. But I was saying it is. Next slide. So this is the elevations. So this is just showing existing on the bottom. Pleasant Street. Only thing happening is elevation, removal of the icon shutters, removal of the existing big awning deck, and then on the proposed south elevation, you'll see next elevation, the west elevation. Section of brick steps and landing, and the metal door on the next elevation. In existing, obviously. So, what the thought was to sort of deal with some of this blank space, obviously that good way, and introduce two window opening as shown. The doorway, remove those two windows. Streamline. And then in the back, this is the existing deck. And the new entry to the introduction of a few windows, which I think help with the elevation and also function. On the next slide, and I'm done. Almost done. That's just streetscapes showing what's there. Strange little street because, you know, I had to put that thing almost 8 feet in the air because flood was 5 feet at sea level there. Parking in front, sort of odd, very nice. Nice church across the street. So there's sort of all sorts of things happening. So this is atypical, having these brick walkways on that west elevation. But not really, because that would be the side where you have a piazza. There is no piazza, so that's next slide's the final one. So that's just showing construction of the but yeah, you over each door, there's 3 of them, and then stairways.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant? Is there any public comments? Hearing none, we will move on to staff comments.
Staff just had an observation that we think the proposal brings a lot of order to the chaos that is currently the west elevation. So we wanted to implement that. As far as comments, staff recommends adding brackets to visually support the new entry awnings. Provide height and material of the proposed retaining wall at the west and north. And we want the applicant to confirm the status of a large tree that appears to conflict with the side wall, gate, and lead walk to President Street, and to make sure that zoning approval has been. Other than that, we are recommending conceptual approval with staff comments and final review by staff.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, would you like to clarify or respond to these comments?
Oh, sure, briefly.
You're not obligated to.
Oh, I know. But I'll be brief. So I'll look at the brackets. We thought we will need to go back to the elections. I sort of felt like entry door surround is sort of the one that should be the most could go back to that front elevation, that would be nice. So there are, maybe the photos would show it better too, but there's sort of like raster brackets. So they're I guess, or medallions is what I used to call them. I guess. But there's some brackets at the front and sort of more detailed door surround. And I thought just the simple cantilever awning would suffice. But I'll look into it. Maybe there's a way to sort of do it minimized. Now I've lost number 2 and number 3. I know about the tree. We have, this is the owner here. I believe you have the approval. That's a tree that is, it's a nice big tree, but it's been approved and probably.
We just couldn't track down any of the people from zoning that were approving trees, so
Okay.
we hadn't been able to verify that
And what
ourselves.
was number 2?
Height and material of the proposed retaining wall at the west and south. There was, all right. Lori had a note that there was a proposed retaining wall. I'm not sure what she saw that on this, so I apologize.
We'll have some proposed fencing that we hope we can deal with that staff. Typical. We don't have any retaining walls.
Okay. Sure, she was talking about that one.
Thank you. We will now enter board discussion.
I had some questions earlier, but the applicant answered all of them. I think it looks good, makes a lot of sense, and personally, I don't have any problem with there not being brackets on the new canopies. Somehow my eye might want to pull them down so that they're resting on the casing of the door rather than having a piece of siding between them, but that's just a minor suggestion. All I got.
I don't really have anything to add. I agree with Julia. I think that if they don't look, if they come down a little bit so they don't look like they're floating, they don't need brackets. They look fine, simple, just like they are. I mean, well, except squeak down a little bit.
I'd be happy with that. I thought we needed brackets at first, but I like the explanation also of the reasoning behind the brackets. So,
Yeah, it looks like good thing is you're working sort of with the pattern of the fenestration on that west side. You're sort of continuing it and reestablishing it, it almost appears, so that's a very positive. Yeah, I think Julia makes a good point about potentially maybe lowering the on these cantilever, usually they're more linear. I don't know, it's come along to call them a run, that's what I was known to call it. That's just was taught, but I think maybe doing something to more engage that casing around those entry doors, and you might be able to, if you feel like that's going to be too low, you might be able to emphasize the casing around the entry doors a little more. It appears to be actually everything going on in the window, so might be a chance to do both, sort of maybe emphasize the casing around the doors a little bit more, maybe lower down the hoods with no brackets to assimilate. So, yeah, that's all.
I'd be curious to know what you find about previous door openings on the west side. So I'd like to require that he return to tell us about that.
It does look like from the Sanborns, it was a 2-story piazza. It looks like that's what's indicated on the
I don't know, but the footprint on the Sanborns seems like typical single house width. So I'm confused.
Weird.
Sounds like
consensus? Do we have a motion?
You're gonna add any board motions? I think those were just open suggestions when we were talking, right?
Yeah. I don't think the staff comments.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll make a motion then for conceptual approval with staff comments and final review by staff. And that's not comment.
Well, there are, but we don't need them.
Oh, not adding bracket, okay, forget the brackets, yeah.
There's no
Retaining wall. And the trees been confirmed, okay. Conceptual approval with, final review by staff. Thank you.
So we have a motion by Bill, seconded by Julia. All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing 4 in favor, chair votes for the majority. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be 213 Lime Street.
So for a minute.
213 Line is requesting approval for 15 solar panels. It is not surveyed on west side circa 2018 district. Is the location online, existing site photo, in context of Line Street. And more maps showing things there in 1955. Right over that.
My name is John Rowick, R-O-E-C-K, with ADT Solar. And full disclosure, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, not the representative today. So I'll try to answer any questions that you have here regarding this project. I do know that the house was built in 2018. We're going to be adding 15 solar panels for the homeowner to go to the next generation. And it's going to be the majority of the panels facing westerly with 4 on the east side. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions for that?
The question, it looks to me like there are 2 different size modules proposed. Am I seeing that wrong? There's only one that has a specification. I feel like it's 49 by 69 or something, but it looks like there's one that's more narrow among.
Should not be, they roughly should be like 40 by 6 foot. The same level right here and here.
Just graphically somehow they just look different, but they're not.
Yes, so yeah, graphically on this it would look different, but you have different horizontal patterns to fit the fire code. Standing straight up, some on the sides.
Wait, what? Some will be standing straight up?
Some would be in this orientation and others on their sides to make a pattern that fits.
On, like, flat on the roof though, or
Yes,
at the roof
flat
angle?
on the roof,
Yeah.
but
Landscape.
landscape wise, yes.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I was like, what?
No, they're not gonna be sticking straight.
Okay.
Go that way, so.
All right. And I'm just gonna assume that they're all the same size,
They're all the
just
same size,
oriented 2 different ways. Okay.
Oriented to your will.
Is there? Go ahead and ask this. Is there not the possibility to organize them a little more elegantly, especially on that west side that's most visible?
To my knowledge, no, because that would be taken into account building fire code.
Taking some of the ones that you have oriented north-south and adding them to the single run that's oriented east-west, you know, just having I'm jumping the gun a little
You're,
bit.
you're asking to move, say, for example, these three up here, over here.
There, or adding to that portrait row, you know, could one of those not rotate and come down toward the eave? I don't know. All right. We'll talk about it later. Thank you.
The equipment is, there's got a service disconnect and an disconnect. You got 1, 2, 3, looks like 4 pieces of equipment. How exactly where are those mounted?
Service disconnects are gonna be by the electrical meter.
Okay, and so the okay, there. So yeah, that's really a lot of equipment in a very visible spot. Is the thing that is it possible to locate that in a less visible location?
So everything is gonna, the wires are gonna be tucked underneath the actual roof, for visibility speak, and the conduit is gonna be run outside of one single conduit down to the meter base, where your main disconnects are gonna be located. Everything's packed in there for the sake of if there's a
And
emergency.
so, for instance, that main disconnect, how big is that box?
I like it or not.
Roughly.
Yeah, roughly a little larger than my iPad here.
And combiner box,
The same.
that's the same. There's a service disconnect there already.
There's, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. We will move on to any public comment if there is. No. Hearing none, we'll move on to staff observations and comments, please.
Staff observations. So per BAR's solar policy, solar collectors proposed to be installed on new construction shall be permitted, but BAR shall have purview over placement and size of such solar collectors for potential negative impact to character of neighborhood. The existing structure is new construction and it was completed in 2018. While it's not on the corner lot is owned by the city, and right now we are being told will most likely remain vacant. So this makes the roof and the proposed solar panels highly visible. This corner is a gateway to the old city district, and as proposed, all service for these solar panels are next to the electric meter at the front corner of the house and are very visible. Staff comments, this house is a newer contemporary design. Panels may not be detrimental to the clean, pure style of the house, but there is concern that the high level of visibility is detrimental to the character of the neighborhood, including Herman Field, which is across the street, diagonally. And somewhat, we have concerns about character being detrimental to character of the house. As this is a relatively newer project type review, staff would benefit from further discussion by the board on appropriate installation locations. If approved, all conditions of solar policy related to installation shall be incorporated. And if approved, mechanical services at the front corner of the house should be screened. Staff recommendation is currently denied.
We will now enter board discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have anything to clarify or respond to from the city?
One question, in general, they're recommending now because they
can be seen?
It's because of the high level of visibility. Our policy leans toward being slightly minimally visible.
Sorry for missing that. So we'll now enter board discussion.
Yeah. So you're gonna go ahead, Thelma. You know what I'm gonna say. I want there to be a lot of solar panels in Charleston, and I think this is a really great opportunity to introduce them, and I have no problem with them being visible on a house like this. None. My only two suggestions, requests would be, I don't think there's a code requirement that your disconnect be immediately adjacent to the meter. If that could go on the east side, I think that would really help to Fillmore's point. And similarly, if the array on the east side could be adjusted to be elegant and simple and ordered, I think this would be wonderful, personally.
Julia's point, I agree. I don't necessarily agree that I want to see solar panels all over the historic district, but I understand that we have to start accommodating this. It's critical, and particularly Charleston, because every kilowatt of electricity we use is produced by coal. So every time we put these up, it makes a little dent in that, and I am all in favor of that. I think it makes more sense to me, or it's more logical to start with new construction. I will say I have never seen a solar panel array on any roof that was attractive. Just not. But it's but we've got to start sort of figuring out how to best accommodate. We've made steps with obviously with the guidelines, but I'm kind of with Julie on this. If you could make the array look a little more consistent and ordered, if you could appropriately screen the disconnects in the other paraphernalia that go along with this, or move it so it's less visible, then I would be in favor of that.
Another thing too, and I don't know, quite tie it together, but proposals for new construction, the question could be asked, are you considering solar array on this roof, design a roof that facilitates it and conceals it at the same time? That would be a nice way to look at it. Just the graphic here is showing two different sizes. One is rectilinear, the other looks like it's square. I think at least some orderly arrangement of these panels would be a lot more desirable. I know a good engineer did this, but just an orderly arrangement of uniform size tiles.
I'll say that on a new construction with a black or nearly black shingle roof, those are a lot of positives to help take a bit of attention away from the panels. And I think I've said before, I certainly encourage the use of solar panels when they can be used. So my only question is, Frankie, if we were to go back to the plan view, we were kind of talking about the orientation of them. I really wish there could be a consideration, and I understand where the meter base currently is, but I really wish the panels could be pushed to the south to free up visibility of the roof on the northwest corner, which is the most visible, I think, to the city's point about the visibility of that.
Away from Line Street.
Away from Line Street, kind of push them back. I mean, it appears to me that property on the corner is related to drainage tunnels and so forth, and it probably will remain vacant forever. because the flooding isn't going away. I think if there's a way to consolidate and push the panels further to the south, as opposed to breaking them up in two different groupings, it would be really beneficial and to me would exemplify a good opportunity to put a relatively large grouping of panels on the newer house. Does that make sense?
I have no problem seeing them. No problem. I think there's something to be, well, not necessarily celebrated, but not to be ashamed of.
Well, they definitely wouldn't be invisible. I'm just thinking that it would be nice to kind of push them into a grouping instead of two groupings. Technically three, but two groupings on that west facing facade.
Is there a rendering of this at one point, maybe in a previous application that wasn't actually submitted? Was there a rendering of how it looked at the exterior? This was submitted before it just got
Yes,
deferred.
it was submitted before and it got deferred. I thought this was the same presentation.
It probably is, I'm just imagining something.
So I'm just saying, like, if you could do all of that, there's a pitch change right there, but you could go straight across and have that lower rung right there. Frankie, are you able to pull up the west, like, let's say the Google Street View? Yes, sir.
I'm not sure what protocol is, but I could pass it on my head right now and answer that question, I think, for you.
Okay.
Okay. Cool.
Just for the sake of public meeting, go ahead, pass it around to the board, but for the sake of public meeting, I'm going to pull it up on the screen.
Okay. So
The increase right here, these little white squares represent areas that they can live. And if you're proposing to throw them all back here, that's a spot where they could live. See, I can just add them right there with my finger.
I know I moved too far back.
If you're proposing here, you can, hopefully that better answers your question, how they would look out there.
Oh, okay. How does that work for you guys?
Technology prevents us from putting it in this area because you've got a little bit of a porch up there. Yeah, that's original, that is all that jazz. So this would be enough that satisfies.
To relocate more of them over there.
Yeah. This was a better spot for her production.
Is that what you were
Yeah, are you able to just sort of rotate around and so I think this may help you as well.
If I move very
so-
much, it goes to an older.
Okay, no, that's fine.
elevation.
So just to clarify for the public, the applicant was sort of showing where you can and can't put them. My point was that the city's comment, this is incredibly visible. And so my request was, could we focus on what I'm calling the back half of the house? It appears there also is an opportunity to put more panels on the opposite side, which is far less visible to the public. So that's all.
Like to see it? For the sake of her solar production, this is the point that was recommended.
Right.
Given the roof area, you can also put more on the back if that's what is recommended and asked for. Those little boxes represent where they could also live. So if I were to just add, for example, these three, that's where those three would live. House. That better answers the question.
Okay.
So there are other opportunities,
There are.
it's just that it's not as ideal and you don't collect as much solar necessarily.
Any other questions or?
I mean, I think think a better arrangement of the solar panels could be presented, and it might be a slam dunk. That wasn't a motion.
Make a motion to that effect and send it to staff for final. Is that deferral?
Staff or
You can
maybe,
defer it with a final review by staff. Sure.
do we? That's fine.
I would
Staff
just
can come
include
here.
directive as to what the encouragement is to
Right.
refine.
Find the configuration of the arrays.
To maximize the east elevation of the roof. That would be required. West side of the roof towards the south, or other options that Julia might have.
And should we put in there, relocate the
Oh, yeah. And
equipment to the,
relocate the equipment to a less visible location.
that was a motion made?
Okay. And that would be deferred with final review by staff.
We have a motion by Fillmore, seconded by Julia, which technically defers the application, but gives it a path for potential final review and approval by staff. All in favor? Chair votes for the majority, and the motion passes 5-0. Thank you. '60 Calhoun Street will be next. We are going to take a 5-minute break.
I just am torn between that.
I was, you know, I do have a picture, I don't have a good picture of my house, but that's my house. It was up there like in very regular rows on there.
No offense to your house. I still think they look different. The reason they're not on the, I love it, my house faces south. There's no so long and working out.
See how they were like taking freedom now and then they like walking tacos back? They like a bigger bag. And they all like walk.
Designed the house and my wife discussed it. She said, "My facade, I hate it. I mean, it's terrible."
Yeah.
And so I've got to figure out how to get there. I've got an empty service conduit, but I'm not sure it's big enough to fit the house in my barn. But if it is, I don't put them on my
Yeah,
barn.
there's, I mean, our electric bill's $30 a month, but,
Mine was $1,420.
yeah. But, and that, if it were just a decorative thing, I would, of course I wouldn't want it on there, but I factor in, you know, what it's doing for us as a planet. And so I think they're beautiful by virtue of that, you know?
I'd like some double pane windows.
How big's your house?
It's big. 15,
Do the interior storm windows?
It's not that. 2,000 square feet. It averages, of course, it's up and down, depending on the season.
I mean, everything. I mean, the heat's 764. It's not some crazy.
Interior storm windows would be good.
In 78,
You have it?
seasonal settings.
A very large snack pack.
Well, I'm not really thinking it, I was just thinking of it. you guys send.
Oh, envelope. Sorry.
This is not.
No, hold on, I'm not gonna see it.
Oh, wow.
Some sustenance. We kind of treat it right. Frankie's got some flavor, caramel popcorn.
Oh my, like trash can sauce?
There's also some tiny little bag of chocolate chip cookies. I found those when I was stocking at Quincy.
You did.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order, and 60 Calhoun Street is next up.
Calhoun Street is requesting conceptual approval to alter penetration for a new ADA entry. It is category 4 in the Greg Burr circa 1835 to 1852 in the Old and Historic District. It is a location on Calhoun Street. Existing site photo. Context of Calhoun. Or map showing the history of the structure. I will turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. Hi, I'm John Sullivan, SR Studio, representing the applicant. This is a very minor alteration to the building, concentrated on the west side of the building. Used to be a piazza, it's been infilled. First floor is CMU, and there's a picture window further down. The plan is this to remove that picture window, make a double door, and then the west side is really a dirt parking area. It's not used for parking, but we is making me keep a potential parking spot there. So there's some new pavers, some landscaping to get to that ADA entry back there. And adding 2 courses, there's remains of a CMU wall between this, and then there's a walkway next to it for the library that goes back to Little Park. That's a foot or so higher. We're just raising that wall 16 inches and stuck on that wall. With that, with any questions?
You want me to pull up or?
You can, right there, you see the picture. That picture window there is what we're taking out and making a double door beside that. Back.
Any question, or sorry, are you, any questions of Mr. Sullivan? Thank you. Is there any public comment? And staff comments?
Staff just had 2 observations. The alterations are minimally visible between the 2 structures. And while work is considered to be sensitive and minor alterations, staff does not find the policy statement for staff reviews was applicable, which is why we brought it to the board tonight. Staff recommendation is for conceptual approval with a final review by staff.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, I'm guessing you probably don't have any rebuttal to that, but good. Thank you. Board discussion.
Glad they have a little alleyway over there to do it. All right, I'll go ahead and make a motion for conceptual approval of final review by staff.
Thank you, Bill. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Laura. All in favor?
Aye.
A vote with majority. Thank you.
I'll grab one.
8 Gadsden Street will be up next.
8 Gadsden is requesting conceptual approval for a rear street porch addition. It is a category 3 in Charleston Village, circa 1880 in the Old and Historic District. Thank you. This is the property location on Gadsden Street. Some existing site photos. Context of Gadsden. And board map showing the history of the structure. Turn it over to the applicants.
I'm April McGill, the architect of Rebound Designs, representing my clients, 8 Gadsden. They are wanting to build a rear addition of a screen porch, and you scroll to the Sanborn maps. And believe that we believe the original structure was separated from the
your structure originally. It seems like the piazza turned in the corner and there was a separation. And then the space was joined later, which seems like you guys found a sampler map that we couldn't find in 1955. So the proposed addition is, if you so currently there is existing decking on the rear part of the structure in the same general vicinity of where we have the proposed screen porch addition. The decking is currently 2 different levels. It has some railings on it. And if you actually scroll back to the photos, you can see bottom right photo, there is a small awning over top of the rear entryway that we do not believe is historical to the original structure. So we are proposing a demolition of the existing decking and that small roof ring so that we can tie in the new proposed screen porch addition. And if you go back to the floor plan, please. Actually, the next one. So we actually are proposing that the screen porch is a bit narrower than the existing extent of the decking, so we pulled this in just a bit. We've also provided our pipe in between the existing structure and the new proposed addition. And if you would please scroll to the elevation. Really tried to be as sensitive as we could to the existing structures. This rear building back here is quite low in height, but we really tried to design the screen porch so that we didn't want to exceed the height of the existing structure. And we feel that it's appropriate in terms of height, scale, and mass, and we received support from our local preservation groups and other community stakeholders. We have provided more detail in the package than what's required for conceptual approval. We're hoping that since it's a rear addition, accessory structure, non-controversial, at least as far as we have heard, that we could shoot for final approval with staff comments, just to expedite it, but yeah. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the board?
No, actually, I did read your introductory letter, and were you able to speak with staff at some point? Just curious. And that mentions that you tried. Okay. Okay.
So, on the final page is a perspective view from the street from the line. Quite minimal because there's a privacy fence, and then the existing cedar tree is there as well. So the amount that will be visible from the sidewalk is.
Called out for a standing seam metal roof. You decided what that's going to be, what metal roof?
We did not specify the actual metal, but
specified the color.
Got aluminum gutters, so I'm assuming it's gonna be a galvanized.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to city staff.
Staff observations, the proposed addition is subordinate and differentiated from the existing house, and the screen porch addition is minimally visible. Staff comments, we request the approve of the column width provided and suggest thickening them slightly. Suggest centering the screen framing on the center of the column to give visual dimension to the column. Extend the porch floor to make the skirt board sit just beyond the brick foundation piers, and suggest painting the columns and screen framing white to coordinate with the house. We are recommending conceptual approval with a final review by staff.
You have any reply to that? Thank you. Or discussion?
The darker color, like we can see in the perspective, with that color down there.
I'll just start. I'd say I'm in agreement with Scott's comment and recommendation. I believe the one reason for the 3 is the elevation seems to show it the way that you're describing it, but it's the section. There's a conflict between the section and the elevation. So I think that's why
The alignment of the column and the brick veneer.
the skirt board there
Oh.
at the bottom. Yeah, so that's the reason for that comment. So I think what Frankie would be saying in that comment, we're looking more for what the elevations are depicting rather than the sections.
Generally though, I think it's really visible, it's thoughtful. I'll just make a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments 1, 2, 1, 2, and 3. Final review by staff. So, final review and final review by staff. I mean, final approval and final review by staff. Is that cool?
So Julia's made the motion and Laura has seconded the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0, motion to pass.
And if we'll do that final review in the permit. Is requesting approval to replace 13 6/6 windows with 2/2 wood simulated divided light windows. The property is not surveyed in Charleston Village circa 1800 in the old and historic district. This is the existing location on LaGree Street. Existing site photos. Some context of LaGree. And board maps showing the history of the structure. Sorry. Turn it over to the applicant.
need to replace 13 windows in the back of the house that are rotting. And they're actually simulated divided light windows now. That looks like they were done probably in the mid-2000s. So like 2005, 2006 when the house was redone. They're all rotting. The sills are all rotting. They're single pane simulated divided light 6/6. And we're looking to replace them with windows that look like the other windows in front of the house, which are 2/2. I think if you can see that, you go back a little bit to the house. And it's, you zoom in the front of the house, you can see there are 2/2 windows. And those are also, you'll see on the side, there's a side view going down to the neighbor's driveway. We have 2/2 in the front here, and we're looking to replace just some of these windows in the back here.
You've got one where they're circled.
I think, yeah, there's one where, yeah. And there's windows in the back of the house, and there's windows on the back section of the other house that's stepped back. And this would be what we would replace them with. Double pane simulated.
Are there any questions?
Is that clad with, is that aluminum clad? What am I looking at?
This is aluminum clad, yeah.
Is there anything that shows, sorry, a better view of the existing windows?
About the street view in there, definitely, 2/2 across the front.
I went by there, as far as I could see down the side across the front, they were all 2/2s. You can see the back, of course.
Any public comment?
April Wood, HCF has reviewed the application to replace 13 6/6 windows with 2/2 simulated divided light windows at 63 on Green Street. Simulated divided light windows are inappropriate on historic houses within the historic district. This part I wasn't clear about, but if the windows are historic and are in deteriorated condition, they should be repaired rather than replaced. If the windows are not historic and require replacement, they should be replaced with wood true divided light windows as required on historic houses within the old and historic district. We recommend denial of this application.
Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We have the same comments as Historic Charleston Foundation. I just also want to reiterate that it was really difficult based on the materials submitted to understand the age and condition of the windows. We would ask that this be denied for all of the reasons that HCF just mentioned, but also feel that any proposal that comes forward should be accompanied by a window survey that really specifically calls out which windows require replacement. And should be replaced with true divided light with windows in the historic district. Thank you.
If you can't see these windows from the street, it's very difficult to see them from the street. They need to be replaced that way. I mean, you can just have them repaired right now where they are. And they're going to be divided light 6/6. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to put windows that are going to rot again in the same place.
So I will try to briefly answer that. It appears that they are visible. So if there is any visibility from the public realm, then they are within the purview of the discussion. And box we have circled on or squared on the application appears to be visible. Frankie, I'll let you.
From what we noted, the ones along the side were visible from the public right of way. We didn't note any visibility on the ones at the rear.
more public comment? So staff can now give their comment, please.
Staff had an observation that while 2 over 2 windows would match the rest of the house, the slight pattern would not have been original to the structure. And no documentation of the condition of current windows was provided. Staff comments are that simulated divided light windows are inappropriate at this location and for this age of structure. And so staff is recommending denial.
Do you have anything you'd like to clarify?
The simulated divided light already exists, and those windows exist in those places right now. Question.
That's what's
there.
I'm gonna ask staff a question here in a minute that might answer that. Ask the question.
Well, so we really probably should now enter more discussion, and you can ask.
Is there anything in the file that's presented about replacement of these windows, or was this done without
I haven't
approval?
found documentation of when the windows were replaced. That being said, we didn't have much time looking for it last week as we were severely short-staffed. So we would be willing to look to see if simulated divided light was approved previously.
I just didn't know if any wanted to propose any window replacements at all, regardless if it's simulated divided light or not. There are a bunch of, we're well aware that there are many windows around town, and there are many windows around town that weren't approved. So adding on to and compounding that by saying, well, that's what's there, it's not what's supposed to be there. And so I just wanted to see if there was something in the file about a window replacement on this house within, how many years ago did you think these windows were replaced?
My sense that was around 2006.
Okay, so it's current enough, it should be in the file.
Along those lines, we at least need a plan or something that shows which windows need to be replaced, because some of those windows might not, like Franklin said, might not be in our purview because they're not visible, but we still shows which windows need to be replaced, or some kind of key or something. And also, I think good photos of the existing windows that need to be replaced so that we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, the submittal is just inadequate. I kind of think it should be a deferral. Including any relevant history.
I think that sounds fair, because some of the history may work in your favor. It sounds like we just don't have that available, but I agree that I think, if you're asking to replace 10 windows, we need a map and a photo, not a map, but essentially a plan or an elevation with keys and then photos of each window, just to fairly evaluate it.
And also request of staff to obviously investigate the file and see what potentially transpired from a permit and or approval standpoint. Do you have a motion?
I move for deferral so that the applicant can submit a full, complete application with photos, some showing which windows are to be replaced, and any history that would be relevant. Okay.
Laura and Julia second. Frankie, do you have that information? Yes. In favor of the motion?
Aye.
Chair votes with majority, 5-0, the motion passes. Next and final is 195 Tread Street.
The TRAD is requesting conceptual approval for fenestration alterations and porch addition. It is not surveyed in Charlestown circa 1930 in the old and historic districts. This is the property's location on Tradd Street. Existing site photos. Context of Tradd Street. And satellite maps showing the history of the structure.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jody Crosby. I'm with Crosby Creations. I feel like I'm too short for this. Glad to be here and glad to be able to bid you guys good night after this. I wanted to open up with stating that this house was originally built in 1930 as a multifamily home. It is believed that the CSS David submarine is buried under the home. I do have a letter of support that I will submit to staff that was just received yesterday by the homeowner. Says this is the homeowner of 190 Tradd Street, across the street from 195. Says, hi Chris, we're trick-or-treating neighbors from across the street. We have had a chance to look over your plan for 195 Tradd, and since we will be unable to attend the VAR meeting, I just wanted you to know that we fully support what you are planning. From our vantage point, it will be quite an improvement. Hope to see you soon in the hood. Back to you. So I'm just going to go elevation by elevation. I know that our application didn't have a lot of explanation. I apologize for that. The north elevation changes. I wanted to note that in some of the photographs and even in our north elevation drawings, that doesn't show that the two front entry doors have true divided lights in a prairie grid fashion, but they are there, they're existing. There were some screen doors that were over those doors, so that's why those are not illustrated properly. The desire is to replace the windows on this elevation with prairie style simulated divided lights, which the actual grid style does also match 150 South Battery. They are wanting to add panel operable shutters with dogs, shutters to be painted with Benjamin Moore HC 190 black. On the east elevation, they are looking to replace the windows with the same style windows as the north elevation. They are removing two doors on the southeastern side and removing the brick steps that go up to one of those doors. They'd like to add a new arched window that's located over their master tub. South elevation changes. They are removing the sliding glass door and replacing the majority of the windows. There are some awning windows up top that they're going to keep in place. West elevation changes, replacing windows, adding two new windows and adding a new door to match the prairie style lights, and adding a new roughly 8x7 landing uncovered at the door with his and her stairs going south and north. All proposed, all of that is proposed to be in treated wood, but also to be painted black to match the shutters on the north elevation. And they're looking to remove the metal awnings that are over the windows on the west side. And that's all I have.
Questions for the applicant?
Windows currently are, the drawing indicates that they're one of the ones.
That is correct, and they need to be replaced.
Are they single pane or IG?
Do you know if there's-
They're single pane, yeah. So there's no information about whether they're original to the house or not.
That we have researched. We haven't even researched that, so.
Thank you.
The shutters at the second floor over the front door, are they supposed to be like bifold or something?
Yes, they would be doubled up to be true operable and able to cover.
And is there any hint that there were ever shutters anywhere on this house?
To my knowledge.
There's a new stair on the west side. It just indicates like pressure treated 2x4 material. That's what you're thinking over there?
Yes, pressure treated, and then it'll be painted black, in one.
Is there any public comment?
I'm Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Similar to the previous request, it was difficult to understand the age and condition of the windows proposed for replacement and the justification for this proposal. It was new information that there was prairie style influence that was being derived from the doorway. That would be interesting to explore, but still feel like there should be more information provided. The Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties specifically advise against conjectural changes that create a false sense of historical development. Thus, without photographic or documentary evidence that this house would have had decorative window sashes as proposed, we're not in support of this proposal. We also didn't realize that the windows proposed were to be simulated divided light, similar to the last proposal windows on historic buildings should be authentic wood, true divided lights, and proposed simulated divided lights are not appropriate for this area. Thank you.
April Wood of Start Charleston Foundation, we have the same comments as the Society, and we respectfully recommend for all of this application more study of the age of the windows, and if the windows are historic, condition analysis and inventory should be performed to determine which windows can be repaired and which can be replaced over time. And again, you're not.
Any other? The staff, will have staff comments now.
Staff didn't receive any historic documentation regarding the windows and if the prairie style was existed on the house. So it's not a comment for that prairie style windows would be inappropriate for the location and age of the structure if they're not original to the house. We recommended omitting the shutters on the center second story pair of windows. If they are bifold shutters and operable, we would really just strike that comment. And we recommend describing the process for salvaging and reusing the brick or color matching brick for headers at the new openings and infill at closed openings. Staff recommendation is deferral with denial of window brick pattern.
Thank you. So now if Jody, if you'd like to respond to that.
I guess the question is, the homeowners they're very, very willing to work within the guidelines. Would they have to go through the process of a window survey if they were to replace the windows with no divided lights with windows?
If they were replacing them to match, staff could review, but we would still need documentation that they need to be replaced rather than repaired.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'll now move on to board discussion.
There's not a lot of information here to begin with. There's not any information on that I can find in the submittal, real information on what the new windows would be. No information on what the old windows are, if they're original. And so I think the prairie style windows would be speculative for the shutters would be speculative without appropriate documentation. So I think that makes it difficult to approve this. I'd like to see a little more information, details on the stairs. So we have a little better idea of what those were actually going to look like.
I mean, in general, it seems like what's proposed is probably generally reasonable, but it's really hard to make it out with the information we've been provided. The east elevation, I think if there weren't any trees there, I kind of think you could see that new arched window over the top, but it seems a little foreign to me. I don't know if anybody else is concerned about that.
I thought the same thing, but then I can see it's trying to mimic that
Yeah.
side porch.
The porch openings.
That double row lock on the out or something.
Okay.
Along those lines, maybe.
I might need to do a deferral just to allow them to provide better materials and justification for what they're asking for.
And maybe a good study of, I generally am not at all opposed to shutters, but I think this is a hard house to shutter. The window spacing, especially from the corners, makes it a bit of a challenge. I've been sitting here kind of trying to think how would it look if part of it was shuttered and part of it wasn't, and that might be weird. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, when you start having these bifolds and the tight corners, it's asking for a lot of mechanics in order to close and make those shutters work. Certainly nice to be able to close shutters and know that you're protecting your windows, but a hard house to do it on.
Yeah. Let me ask, if I may, one more question of the applicant. Is there any intention to paint the brick at any point? That's not part of your intention, okay.
Part of the application, though, did include not only the arch window, but two windows that were existing originally. This elevation. And also closing up, there's a couple doors that are kind of hazardous. One of them on the second story just opens up into free fall. And there's a sliding doors on the back that also open up to 6 feet. So if I could proceed closing those up and opening windows, then we could postpone the actual window selection and shutter discussion for the time. Get partial approval on that. Bring a salvaging brick. There's, if you look at the samples, I think there was an old three-car garage back in the day, and whenever it was taken down, all the brick was piled up in the back of the house. So I have a ton of original brick, which is going to be put to use here. It's kind of a striated brick, so it's there's also the possibility the door that's closing up on the east side has a brick staircase, so I can use some of those bricks to fill in the gaps.
And I guess that your comment about restoring windows on the west side is an example of where a little more information would be helpful, because it just says new windows and door, but if you're, want to
In
tell
the
us that
application, I think there was a picture, we've done some demo on the inside. You can see where it was framed out, the windows were there.
Yeah, there's a good photo showing sheathing over. So the photo from the interior.
I'm just saying, it'd be really cool if you just write that on the elevations too, so it was super clear. So I'm gonna try to make a motion for deferral to allow the applicant, once their application to clarify the proposal and provide justification of proposed changes. Especially regarding fenestration, shutters, and new stairs.
Is it the board's position that we perish it's allowed at this point, or come back with further justification for that?
Well, A, we're in a motion, but B, I think the question that I've heard, or the internal discussion is that if you did find any photos that something was different, I think that would make things be viewed differently.
More
I
information.
think at the
more
moment, the
justification.
question is, are these windows original or were they replaced? So let's move on with, or just
And let me
get
also
through the
add,
motion.
can I also add staff comment number 3? For the record.
Go second.
I'll second.
Second by Fillmore. All of those in favor?
Aye.
I vote with majority, so the motion passes 5-0. That will conclude our meeting, so I think if our meeting is over, I'm sure we could, if there's a question lingering, we could probably try to answer that for you off the record, or non-binding.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. So we're now adjourned, so if you would like to have a non-binding question answer.
I think the windows are